So, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. We're back with Abe Mizliach, and we're talking about his current situation where he's now just met his wife. We're picking up where we left off for the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Obligations of Memory interview series. This is our second part. So welcome back, Abe, and welcome back to our audience.
Thank you.
You were talking about you just met your wife from sort of a 2G event, and so tell us about when how long you dated, when did you get married, and we'll start there.
All right. So I met Miriam in San Francisco when I was living in San Francisco, and both of us were part of the second generation group. And we dated for several years and ended up getting married in San Francisco in 1993. Her parents were Holocaust survivors. Her mother, Toba, and her father, David, were from Poland. And they met in a displaced persons camp just 2.5 hours from Feldafing in a DP camp called Bad Reichenhall. So we had that in common. I lived in Menlo Park and she lived in San Francisco. And I wanted to buy a house, but both of those locations were pretty expensive. And I learned that Fremont, California was less expensive and good schools to raise kids in. So we bought a house in Fremont, and we've been there almost 30 years.
That's
been
terrific.
Here almost 30 years.
That's terrific. So,
that's the lake behind me where I do a lot of hiking, and Miriam and I do walks, and I used to run there, and that's in Fremont as well.
That's pretty, very pretty. I love the mountains too, at the lakes and the mountains. That's terrific. So, okay, so you dated and then you decided that you were going to propose. So obviously you had to go over to Miriam's parents and knock on the door. And how did that experience go? Is there any stories about you meeting her second generation family?
Well, I think this is my.
Here she comes. She decided.
I knew I would lure Miriam. I knew I would lure you in.
Hi.
Hi, Miriam. How are you?
I can't see me.
Okay, come on up. Come on up. There you go.
There you go, Miriam. Nice to meet you.
Was she there? Hi, nice to meet you.
Isn't it funny that you don't want to be talked about without being on screen? So here you go. So now,
well, the
now
door is closed. I just
happened
happened to be walking by, so I just wanted to say that.
Well, that's always a good excuse. I'll leave you have that excuse. So you have, I just asked Abe that you're in the process of dating, and he's decided that he's going to propose, and obviously you want to bring him to your family, who are also 2Gs. You're a 2G and have Holocaust survivors. So I just asked what it was like for you to experience having him come to meet your parents.
Well, my mom, I think I'm looking at the background, so I'm like looking at an empty screen.
All right, don't worry about the background. I can see you fine.
Well, unfortunately, my father died when I was 16, which was really traumatic. So, he met my mom, who was, I think, pretty thrilled. I mean, I enjoyed being a single and, living and working. I was working in, had left teaching. I was working in nonprofit PR for Children's Hospital and Volunteer Center, I think, previously.
Right.
And so, I really wasn't really looking to get married. I remember after dating, I think about 2.5 years, Abe said, so, and, we were living in 2 different cities because I didn't want to move to where he was living and so on. And he said, well, don't you ever think of getting married? And I said, yeah, sure, one day, And then I think that was, so we'd been dating, I think about 2 years at that point, off and on. I mean, he was traveling the first year he traveled. So we, we were just very casually dating. I remember that first year. And then we started, going back and forth, visiting on weekends and so on. And then when he said that, I think about 6 months later, he proposed. So,
Okay. So what were your memories of going to see her parents?
oh, my mom, yeah,
Yeah.
my mom.
Well,
Sorry.
she was a wonderful woman, very energetic, a lot of fun to be with, a little strict on Miriam, but
I didn't even
No?
live with her, so
I loved her pickles. She
yeah.
made the best
Wow.
pickles in the world.
So Miriam, how many siblings do you have?
I just have one older sister who's
And
you know,
are
kind
you
of-
are you
yeah,
close? Are you close?
she's a very unique personality. We'll just put
Uh,
that.
So did you seek her advice on Abe or no? Okay.
No, she never got married. So
All right, so I'm going to reverse the question. So now, Abe, you're bringing Miriam into your parents' home. What was that reaction, and how did you feel? I'll ask Abe to go one, and then I'll ask you, Miriam, how you felt about it.
Well, I was really lucky because I left, as I told you earlier. I was living in California and they were still in the Chicago area. So I got away with a lot without them knowing it. But when they did visit, they enjoyed meeting Miriam. And I think it was great. They also met Toba, and I don't recall anything except they were just so happy that I got married and
finally,
and we had a family.
And how about you, when you visited Miriam, what's your recollections of his parents meeting you?
they were really, very nice and warm and thrilled because they had given up on Abe. He was in his 40s, mid 40s, so at the time, and that's basically it. So
Okay,
how about? Oh, go ahead.
How about your sister and your brother?
My sister and brother.
Yeah.
Well, again, they were in Chicago, and my sister didn't think I would ever get married, and both of them were pretty happy that I did, and we were all together for our wedding. And I see them every once in a while, but like I said, we're not that close.
Okay, so now we're taking us the next step, obviously, and I hope you stay with us, Miriam, because
Okay.
you're going to have plenty to say in this next part too. So you're now getting married. You're both. So tell us a little about your children. When did you have your child? And I want to eventually get to the point where how you steered his success. So let's talk a little bit about your family and growing up, bringing him up. And I also asked Abe about trauma that you may have had when you were growing up. Did you experience any trauma from your parents' Holocaust experience?
Not really. I mean, when I grew up in Montreal, so my parents had, at that time, there were a lot of other Jewish survivors, living there. So
and they came from Europe. They came from Europe directly to Montreal?
No.
Oh, my parents, no. My parents met, I don't know how much I told you because I was in
In a DP camp in Bad Reichenhall.
Yeah, I mean, they met there, and not initially. My mom actually, I don't know how she got credentialed there, or whatever. We have a certificate, and so she actually taught. We have lots of pictures of her teaching the younger kids there, and because she was in her mid-20s, I think, at that time. Only from her immediate family, only her and her sister survived. And so she was teaching there, and she said that I was like her. I was kind of picky about like getting married and who I was going to marry. And so then she met my father. My mother had been in Auschwitz, and she had been in the Lodz Ghetto and Auschwitz and all that. My father he was a little bit older, so he had, I think, gone to the Ukraine and worked, and somehow was put into the Russian army. That's all I know. He never talked about it. He was a very quiet intellectual type. My mother was also very intellectual. She spoke like 8 languages. And so, you know, I don't know. I was much younger, and she didn't talk that much. They didn't talk that much about to my older sister either. So I just have bits and pieces that I know, and I don't really know that much.
When your parents did, what careers did they have?
Well, you know, my father. Okay, so they went. Okay, after Bud Hall, I think you know, they met, they got married. She got, you know, she was pregnant, and then my father did have 2 surviving older siblings who had left, you know, Poland, that area, earlier, or were hidden. I don't know the whole story, or hiding, or partisan. I'm not sure. And so they went to Israel. His 2 older siblings, and his older brother had, you know, had a family. He had a family actually, I think, before the war. That wife, I think, died, and then he got remarried in Israel. His other sister never got married. She was like an intellectual and worked for the government or education. So we were, because of that connection, they were able to go to Israel. Okay, so they flew there, and my sister was born there. And then it was really difficult to make a living there. They were living in tents, they said, picking, you know, it was really a difficult time. So they knew someone who vouched for them to come to Canada. So they went to Canada, and a year or so after that, I was born there. And so I think that was like and in the 50s. And then they emigrated to the States because my mother's surviving sister lived in California, in San Francisco. So we moved here in the mid-60s.
I gotcha.
Okay. And my parents, what they did, you know, in Canada, my mother was a homemaker because she had kids, but she earned extra money. She was really good with sewing, and she did all the little, she would take home, you know, for little kids' clothes. She embroidered all the little animals and all of that. You know, to earn money, and she was an immaculate housekeeper. I mean, the house you could eat off off the floor. She baked, like, you know, cheese, everything, you know, cakes, and she cooked, you know. So that's how I love cooking. I mean, I got that love through her, and I love to cook and bake and all of that. So
did you go to eat at Abe's mom's house? I heard some stories. That's why I'm asking.
We talked about that.
After we got married, we went back to the old house, you know, their old house right after, and yeah, it was nice.
I heard some stories. That's why I had to set you up with that story. So
yeah, but everyone knows. I mean, Abe, everyone knows. All my friends, my Jewish and non-Jewish friends, would ask for my mother's like honey cake recipe. This, you know, this. They'd come over for, you know, Friday, you know, for chicken soup and you know, egg noodles or matzo balls, depending on the holiday, and so on. So anyways, in Montreal, you know, my dad didn't have that. He was really, you know, he was an intellectual type, but he didn't have, you know, the schooling to prove it. So I think in Montreal, he worked at a really nice, it was like a butcher shop, but, you know, where I think he was the only Jewish person, so it was a little hard on him. But, you know, they wore white coats, and it was like a nice showcase, and it was in the old part of Montreal and stuff. And then when they came, they had an opportunity to move here and to go into business, owning a deli in San Francisco with my aunt and her husband. Unfortunately, my father had a sudden heart attack and died 5 years into that, and then they took over the business, and my mother, you know, left and became a See's candy sales lady for many, many, many years.
Oh yes,
you know,
Warren Buffett owns See's Candies now.
We love See's, so but that's basically it. And then you know.
So let's talk about your birth of your son. So when did that happen?
1995.
Okay. my son was 1990. So we only have one son as well. He's living in New York City. So tell me a little bit about his upbringing and how it related to your parents, both of your parents. A lot of the people I speak with indicate that there are things that naturally come out of our parents that are part of the things that we don't know what we're doing to our children. So do you have any recollections? Were you kind of like fearful of your overprotective helicopter mom?
Probably, you know, a little overprotective.
A little.
No, you too, but because you only have one. But you know, our main thing to him, and Abe will vouch for that, we always said to him, we don't, you know, like when it came to school, we just want you to do your best. We never pushed him if it was an A or B or any or C, you know, whatever. He himself wanted to do his best, so he was always a really good student, and so on. And he, you know, he kind of took the ball and ran with it. You know, he lived abroad. You know, he took semester abroad.
So what was it like for you when he decided that he was going to go to college? How did you deal with your only son leaving the nest? Where did he go to college? And you know, how was that all about? What did that feel like?
Well, the interesting, you know, yeah, we knew we would miss him, but on the other hand, we knew it was time for him to spread his wings. And when he applied for colleges, I said, go apply anywhere. We really did say that, but for some reason, maybe because, you know, we had been such an insular family, you know, three so much, he wanted to stay in California, or maybe because of the weather. So he applied and just accepted UC Santa Cruz, which is only
an hour away.
An hour away.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
About an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we didn't go that often. I mean, we really didn't go down and visit him that often. Just, you know, we really wanted him to.
Well, I'll tell you, we lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I know I started off in Camden, and Philadelphia is only about an hour away from Allentown. So when we were going to look for colleges, my mother we went to Philadelphia, and my mother wouldn't allow me to go to Philadelphia. She was scared to death of a big city like that, because we were in a small little town of, you know, compared to the, so when I actually went to Temple University, and when we finally went to Temple University, we went through the gate from the city to the university. She said, okay, here you go. And you have to come home, because I plan on doing your laundry, because I know you won't be able to do your laundry. So I will see you on the bus every week or every 2 weeks for you to bring home your laundry, and I'll be happy to do that. Now, what's really amazing about my mom, that laundry went all the way to age 30.
Wow.
So my mom and dad actually gave me the first money to live. We lived in a twin in Allentown, and that twin is like they share a common wall. And my parents didn't want to have anybody they didn't like or know, or noisy or whatever. So when I graduated from college, they made it available. That house became available, and they made it available for me to be able to own it. And I went in. So my first house was right next to my parents.
Wow.
Now that dating with that situation was quite difficult.
Yeah.
And my mother would look out the window looking for my car after I would return on a date to see whether I was coming home with anybody, and just who and when and other. So
we were not anywhere near that extreme. No.
So the fact is, this is all the trauma that I lived with, that I didn't know I had any of it. So when I met my wife, Myra, who I said we've been married 36 years, and she came to the house, she knew my parents were living next door.
Oh, wow.
It was quite something to get her even to come into the house, because she knew that she was being spied upon. So my mom would look out the window, peeking through the curtains to see what was going on. So your son now lives in California?
Yeah, he He does. He doesn't.
San Francisco.
San Francisco. He's a senior software engineer, of course.
Yeah. And who does he work?
Everybody.
Who does he work for?
Are we allowed to?
Home Connect, it's a profit-making company that's
It's a
online.
startup.
It's a startup, and they
Oh,
help
Very
the
successful.
environment by having people turn off their electricity for an hour at a time to reduce the consumption of
Yeah.
power plant.
okay. Is he
CO2.
married? Is he
No,
married?
he's single.
He's single. Okay. So would he, if he was on this call or on this Zoom with us, what would he say to his being brought up by second generation Holocaust survivors? Did he know his grandparents?
Right, he did.
Okay,
He
and
was
so
really
what
close
would-
to my mom because she would come. She was only an hour away, so she would come visit when he was little. But she died when he was 10,
Mhm.
so it was painful.
Right. And so what would he say about his parents, about things about his growing up that would be considered to be like overprotective?
Probably
know.
overprotective,
I mean,
but we, like Miriam said, we let him go to college away from home, and
in high
pretty much
school,
was
he
on
went
the-
abroad. He was one of only 8 students who went to France. Remember, we let him. He was really young, and
You don't have to be defensive. I don't want to put you in a
No, I'm
defensive
not. No, I'm just saying. We did. Watch him and do the normal things. Maybe I don't know if we really we had, his friends over and stuff. So
Right.
we weren't. There was a change. Like when I was raised more religiously, but when over the years when I became, when I was single on my own, I was more, or less, not practicing as much. And we live a block from the temple. So when he was younger, Abe wasn't sure we should do. I said, yeah, let's get more involved. And so he could even go to Sunday school and all this and have a bar mitzvah.
What
It's a
are you
reform.
conservative? It's reform? Okay.
Yeah, it's reformed. So we're not, more reformed now. But my mom she was more like conservative than Orthodox, but she was raised, I think, Orthodox.
My mom was raised Orthodox also, but my father, who you weren't part of this, but he escaped Nazi Berlin and at age 15 went to Israel, was really not.
Wow.
His idea of the Passover Seder was Baruch atah Adonai, let's eat. And my mother was so into the Passover that she would love to have done the feathering and the hummus and everything, but my father had no tolerance. So my mother had to give up most of all of the customs that she grew up with. That she would, and I used to hear stories about these customs as well, but none of those existed in our house growing up. So
I remember doing that. Actually, when Stephen was little, I did that. I remember with the chametz about you look for the pieces of bread and
that's right.
And then at a certain age, and especially once he was, out on his own, I didn't do that. But I think one time he said, "Well, aren't you going to do that?"
So one thing I think, Jeffrey, I wanted to point out is that his grandparents, I think, made a big impact on him. That the story of Leon and Lola and Toba. So I think his life has been impacted by him being a third generation. And if we have time sometime, talk about when he decided to go to Poland to see Miriam's mother and my mother's
towns.
Well, we have time. So do you want to tell us?
All right. So when he went to study abroad in Bordeaux, France,
In his
first semester,
in college,
sophomore year in Santa Cruz, and he decided he wanted to go to Poland, and we thought that was not going to be very safe, and
to go by himself.
So I arranged to go with him and get a guide, and we ended up traveling, going to Warsaw and visiting that. It turned out our rabbi happened to be in the same place at the same time. What a coincidence.
Yeah, it was a group, I think it was a group of rabbis
Yeah,
were
group
there
rabbi.
for some event, and they went, well, what are you doing here? What are you doing here?
Anyway,
That's amazing.
so we first went to Locke's, where Miriam's
Loss.
mother, Loss.
Lox is with bagels, that's different.
Oh, okay. Where Miriam's mother, Toba, was raised, which is on the west part of Poland. And we actually thought we saw the apartment or house
Mhm.
because Miriam remembered the street and the square. And
Were you along Miriam too with them?
No, I had some major health
see.
issues,
Okay.
and so I couldn't go. But when they said they were there, I texted, and then I talked to a cousin
Mhm.
who kind of confirmed my thoughts on where this house was, because my mother's parents had been, even though they were religious and all that, they were well known in the community. They were like grain merchants or something, and they'd always have people coming and help people out. And so their house or apartment was right across from the square, and I remembered the number, and I texted him, and but they weren't brave enough. If I was there, I would have knocked on the door.
And then from there, Miriam got a text. I mean, we got a text from Miriam
Yeah.
that her cousin family went through the experience of Pelmno, which is North Poland. You know the story about them being put into trucks and gassed to death.
So,
Turned out that it was late in the evening. It was getting dark, and it was I don't know, almost a 4-hour drive north. But we decided to go ahead and do it, and we ended up in Pelmno, and with flashlights, we went and visited, and we found the plaque,
monuments.
the monument that Miriam's, who was it exactly?
Well, our family, my cousin's family and Sam's family had helped erect this huge monument. It has the names, the family names. And there were other family members and other plaques who used that to commemorate their family members who were, murdered via the Chelmno, the killing fields, the gas trucks and all that.
So that was quite an experience. We ended up then going down to Krakow, south of Poland. And before we went to Auschwitz, we headed east up to Szysłowicz, where my mother's family lived. And there was nothing there. I think there was a parking lot. The names of the streets changed, and so it was difficult. But we found a historian who was not Jewish, but spent a lot of time trying to recreate and keep the history of Jewish Szysłowicz going, and preserved the cemetery there, had a plaque made about the big synagogue that was across the street. So, and then she actually had records of the school children during my mother's time there, and we looked through the records of all the kids, but unfortunately she was in a different class. So that was a good experience to meet locals there that actually cared.
So
about
can you share a little bit about your trip to Auschwitz?
Then we went to Auschwitz. It was a very difficult trip. As you can imagine, we all kind of knew about it, but when you go in there and hear the stories and see the actual thousands of shoes and combs and all these other horrible things that are still being kept there, and see where they lived and how they survived, and especially the post with the noose where they hung people and the place where they shot people, it was overwhelming. And I think Stephen really got affected by it. He was pretty angry about it and didn't want to talk that much, but I think ultimately it was a good experience for both of us.
Now, does Stephen do anything in, they're starting to establish third generational groups around the country. I know there's a big conglomerate of groups in Philly and New York and Connecticut. Is there anything that he's starting to understand, to speak out and to teach on the lessons of the Holocaust?
He's not doing it that way, but surprisingly, again, last year, or the year before, no, last year, he and a friend was going to go to Germany, and he suggested that I come along to visit Feldafing. But because of the COVID situation, I wasn't able to do that. But back in 2017, I started a Facebook group called Families of the Feldafing Displaced Persons Camp. And then Stephen and Miriam decided to follow up with that and do Families of the Bad Reichenhall Displaced Persons Camp.
So family members of, whose parents or family.
Well, do you want to again mention the Facebook group? So if anybody who is listening to this can get to both of yours on Facebook. So why don't you do it slower?
It's called The Families of the Feldafing Displaced Persons Camp. And then the other one is the Families of the Bad Reichenhall Displaced Persons Camp.
And how many members do you have of these groups?
We got about 355 members in the Feldafing group and about 50 members.
50 or 60 in Bad Reichenhall.
In the Bad Reichenhall group. So the reason why I'm bringing that up is that Stephen initiated going to Germany. And when that didn't happen, I didn't want to give up. And so I worked hard with both of these groups with a gentleman from Israel to have a gathering in Germany. And we ended up of the members, and we ended up with 20 people.
Wow. Going
to Germany from both groups and getting to see Feldafing. We actually stayed at the Elizabeth Hotel, which was a hospital where myself and 5 other people were actually born there.
Wow.
It was a hospital. And we had a full tour of the former DP camp, which is now a German camp, army camp. And same thing with Bad Reichenhall. It's an army camp, but it's a lot more secure because they are now involved directly with the Ukraine war. So we weren't able to see very much, but it was an amazing experience for all of us to get to know each other, get to see these DP camps, and to meet and visit the communities around them. The Feldafing community really put their arms around us. And for me personally, it changed my view of the German people. It's difficult for us to think about Germany and the German people as we grew up as second generation people. But the way that they, and especially the mayor, we met both mayors of Feldafing and Bad Reichenhall.
How old are they?
The mayors are in their 50s, I'd say.
40s or 50s,
and the mayor of Fremont, Feldafing, brought us all for a meeting with the council, and he did this wonderful speech about the responsibility of the Germans during World War II, and that preserving the history of the camp and the surrounding areas is critical to them. And when we were in Bad Reichenhall, which my friend from Israel's family was born, there's a colonel there that told a story. He runs the place now, and said that he had an experience in Bosnia where he saw people killing each other that used to be neighbors. And he was brought up with a family where his grandfather would not talk about his experience during the war. And after his experience in Bosnia, he was determined to face his grandfather and say, "What did you do during World War II?" And it turned out that he was a Nazi. But it was wonderful that he had the courage to break through that kind of you don't talk about it philosophy in that family to learn the truth.
Well, I think
it's a wonderful experience.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great place to park and end our interview. And I'm so pleased that Miriam, that you came in at the end. So I think you
I didn't want to interfere, but you kept saying, "Where is she?" So.
Yeah, no, I think it just takes this whole thing up to like a 10x more interesting engagement when I can bring in the relatives and you can get a juxtaposition of different points of view. So I'm really happy that and honored that you joined. So thank you so much. And Abe, I really want to thank you for a terrific 2 hours of just
Thank you.
sharing conversation, having some fun, and talking about our parents and respecting our parents in this way. So I think it's so valuable, and this recording will live on from generation to generation, so you'll be able to share it. So thank you very much. Thank you all for listening to the Obligations of Memory interview series with the Mizliachs, and I'm Jeffery Giesener, founder. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.